Week 11 in college football is here. Upsetting to say that we are already in November. Looking at some of the schedules, like including this week, some teams only have 3 games left in their entire season, which is insane. Kent State played last night. They fall to 0-9. They have yet to lead in a game all season. It's got to be shaping up as one of the worst seasons ever. But to look at more of a positive angle, the first college football playoff rankings came out, Joe. We'll dive into that real quick. But we got an elimination game most likely down in Baton Rouge this weekend between LSU and Alabama. A huge game for Ole Miss as they host Georgia. And quite a few other games that we're going to get into this week. But as always, Joseph, how are we? Welcome back. And have we recovered from Tennessee yet?
I believe I have physically, but mentally, I don't know if we ever will recover from that weekend. That weekend was a lot of fun. I definitely fell in love with Knoxville. I'm definitely curious to see, because we're going to be doing a couple more of these over the next couple of years. I'm curious to see where Knoxville will stack up. But, I mean, great trip. Sucks that Tennessee missed 3 field goals, 2 drop passes in the end zone. And it was the most dominating 10-point win I've maybe ever seen. Like, they were never really – even when they were losing, like, it wasn't – like, people were pissed off they were losing, but it wasn't like, oh, they don't look like the better team to me. That was a very fun weekend, but I am glad to be back and talking about another week of college football and getting locked in for the weekend.
Yeah, I was watching the highlights of the game the other day, and Tennessee was actually losing at halftime. Like, I kind of forgot, but it was 10-7 going into the half. That was pretty wild. All right, we will dive into recap last week real quick. 10-13 for me, 5-2 straight up, 3-4 against the spread, 2-5 on the total, 0-1 on my dog with Illinois against Minnesota, and then 0-1 on my lock of Louisville Clemson going over. 11-11-1 for you, Joe. 5-2 straight up, 1-5 against the spread, 5-2 on the total. Maybe your best week ever there on the total. You push on your dog of TCU +3, and 0-1 on the lock of Nebraska -6.5. One of the more head-scratching results of the entire week. I at least thought they would win that game. For them to lose that game outright to UCLA, pretty wild there. But on Tuesday night, we had some big news, and no, not the presidency, but the college football playoff rankings came out for the first time. The top 25. Instead of just running down the entire top 25, I'll read off the top 12. Oregon at 1, Ohio State at 2, Georgia at 3, Miami at 4, Texas at 5, Penn State at 6, Tennessee at 7, Indiana at 8, BYU at 9, Notre Dame at 10, Alabama at 11, and Boise State at 12. If you would look at that in the bracket, Ohio State would be the 5, Georgia would be the 2, Miami would be the 3, and then BYU was the 4. I guess not only just the top 12, Joe, but top 25 in general. Anything that surprised you? SMU not being in that top 12 in the initial rankings was one of the main kind of talking points. What were your thoughts on those initial rankings?
Yeah, Coyle, I mean, you kind of just said it. SMU, I think, being at 13, I was curious as to where they would end up. I think it's a good spot for them because, it is the first rankings. The one thing that was bothering me when I was watching the rankings come out was talking. It seemed like every team was getting disrespected on ESPN. Every team, oh, this team's disrespected. Oh, Indiana's disrespected. It's like, no, it's the first rankings. There's going to be so much that changes over this next month. I remember the first rankings, the first year of the playoff. It was like Auburn, Ole Miss, and Mississippi State were all in the top 4. Like, things will change. I really think the committee actually did a good job in terms of their top 12. Like, I really wouldn't have any problem if this was the playoff. You can make the argument maybe SMU over Bama, just Bama being, the only 2-loss team right now in the top 12. But besides that, I mean, I thought it was pretty good. And if you go down the rankings, you see there's opportunity for a lot of these teams like Iowa State, even though they just dropped a really bad one. Sitting there at 17th at 7-1, they're only 5 spots out. Back in the first rankings, I'd say they might be dead for the season. But now the beauty of these 12-team playoff is that they're alive. Pitt is still alive with 1 loss. In terms of potentially getting an at-large bid if they were to win out. It'd still be a little bit of an uphill climb, but you can kind of put yourself in that position to get there. I do think it'll be interesting to see what happens with Washington State, like the first year, with the Pac-12 not getting an auto bid because it's only 2 teams. If they were to go 11-1, it's like, like that, it just kind of goes to show, they might be kicking themselves. Same with Oregon State for maybe not doing what they did with all their other sports. Like if they'd gone to the Mountain West for 2 seasons,
Yep.
maybe had a chance to potentially get a better bid there. Army at 25. The only real gripe I have is I don't think Missouri should be ranked. But I mean, they're 24th at 6-2. That's like, if I'm nitpicking, that would be my only like shock and complaint. Like Army being as low as 25, and Missouri being ranked. So besides that, I mean, I have no issues with the top 25.
Yeah, my first reaction was when they showed the actual bracket and it was finished. It was like people who have been complaining or have complained about the 12-team playoff, you're really going to complain about Alabama going to Texas for a first-round matchup and Notre Dame going to Penn State for a first-round matchup. Again, those are just insane there. And then you got the 8-9 of Tennessee, Indiana. Like no one would have ever expected that. And I'm not saying Boise State would be an easy win for Ohio State, but I think the way the bracket came out the first time, obviously there's going to be changes along the way, but Ohio State's in there at the 5 would have to like their path. They have 12 Boise State, and then they would be playing number 4 BYU, who's really number 9. And I'm pretty sure Ohio State would be a 2-touchdown favorite in that game before they eventually maybe match up with Oregon again. So Ohio State, I think that's been kind of a talking point as well, that some of these teams would rather be the 5 seed than the 1 seed, because the 8-9, you're probably like that 11-6 game between Alabama and Texas. Who's to say that couldn't be the 8-9 as well? And then, Oregon, if you're the number 1 seed, instead of Indiana or Tennessee, you're getting one of Alabama or Texas. I'm pretty sure you rather get the Indiana and Tennessee matchup. So it's obviously going to change in the coming weeks. Teams are going to flip flop. There's going to be a few more surprising results, most likely, that we didn't see coming. But you could get a second round matchup of Notre Dame, Georgia, Texas, Miami, Tennessee, Oregon, and Ohio State, BYU. Not really the greatest, but Ohio State, BYU. You're telling me that's not more of an entertaining product than just that 4 team race? And then even you still get down the chance to get to the 4 if just say Ohio State beats BYU, Oregon beats Tennessee, just say Texas beats Miami, and then Georgia beats Notre Dame. You got a Final 4 of Georgia, Texas, Ohio State, and Oregon. Like you're getting kind of back to where you probably would be anyway. But there's a lot more football to watch and a lot more, out there money to be made at the end of the day. So I don't really have any major complaints. I think SMU, maybe I would have had them in over like in Alabama, but SMU obviously has played a much weaker schedule. I was kind of surprised to see Indiana as high as 8. I thought they would be disrespected a little bit more and maybe them be more of like that 11 seed, but they're sitting there at undefeated. They keep winning, and not just winning, but dominating. They got Michigan this week. You get by them, and then you got the undefeated matchup for them, at least, against Ohio State, and Ohio State kind of fighting off this pesky startup Indiana squad. So a lot to still transpire over the next few weeks, but I thought that was an interesting kind of first crack of the breakdown. We got Alabama, LSU, obviously, that we'll get into this week, but the loser of that has 3 losses. It's going to be a minuscule chance, I would say, to make the playoffs. So a huge game in the SEC, 2 really big games in the SEC this week. And we will dive into them all. And we start, not a great 12 o'clock slate this week. Our first game doesn't come until 3:30. It's part of our Big 5, and then including our G5 game of the week as well, which is also at 3:30. But you got number 3 Georgia at 7-1, traveling to Oxford to play the number 16 ranked Ole Miss Rebels, who's 7-2. 3:30 kick on ABC. Georgia 2.5 point favorite here at Ole Miss. Over under is 54.5. Joe, can Lane Kiffin and the Ole Miss Rebels show up and win a big game?
No, and I mean he just hasn't really been able to do it, and I still think he'll be able to get it done. Georgia's a much better team. I think the Jackson Dart I might take over Carson Beck at the QB spot, but besides that, I mean, Georgia plays big boy football, which is something we've seen Ole Miss struggle with. With 2 losses already, losing to Kentucky, that was a real embarrassing loss. At home, I just don't see them getting it done. Like Lane Kiffin, every time, the infamous when they were playing Bama a couple years ago, get your popcorn ready, and I think they scored like 10 points on offense. And they lost like 42-10 or something, like something stupid. Like they just got killed. And at this point, I'm not betting against Georgia. Like they've proven outside of Alabama that they cannot be stopped. So I'm going to just go with Georgia here. I'll take a -2.5. I'll take the over for the sake of a pick on this show, but I'm going to definitely stay away from the total in this game. But I do like Georgia here to win 31-24.
Yeah, I think Georgia over the course of time now has given you the reason to kind of stick with the don't bet against Georgia until they play Bama take, kind of until proven otherwise. And this game is pretty much, Joe, I would say like a carbon copy of that Ohio State Penn State game last week. It's like, all right, this is the year for Ole Miss. They're going to break through and beat Big Brother. But then Georgia just comes in there and not steamrolls them, but they win and they make the big plays when it matters most, and Ole Miss falls flat just like Penn State did last week. I think you could look at this game and say the exact same thing here. I'm very surprised to see the line at 2.5. I thought it would be closer to like 4.5, but that could be an overreaction to the impressive performance that Ole Miss put up last Saturday against Arkansas, where they scored 63 points, and the offense looked like was the offense we were expecting in this kind of breakout season for Ole Miss. Georgia didn't dominate Florida. Obviously, we didn't really get to watch that game, and Beck struggled again, throwing 3 picks. That's got to be a major concern, not just going into this game. Because I think even if Georgia loses this game, they're still probably going to go to the playoff. They might be like the 10 or 11 seed. But going forward, if Carson Beck's throwing 3 interceptions a game, that really limits, obviously, this team's offensive ceiling. One thing I think that should scare Georgia in this game is those turnovers from Beck. He has 11 picks on the year, and Jackson Dart only has 3. He's not going to put the ball in harm's way, and he takes really good care of the football. Let's see how he does against Georgia, obviously. But if Beck puts the ball in harm's way, Ole Miss definitely has the offense to capitalize, and they don't turn it over much themselves. So if you're giving this Ole Miss team more chances to go out there and score at home too, Georgia's defense hasn't been as dominant as we've seen in recent years. Ole Miss definitely has the capability to go out there, put up points, and pull off the upset. I think this is the defining moment of Jackson Dart's career too. It can kind of like make or break his legacy as one of the all-time Ole Miss greats with a win here. So if they win here, they're most likely going to go to the playoff. Nothing's guaranteed, but they have Florida next, and then they host Mississippi State. So there's a very good chance that this is an Ole Miss team that goes 10-2 and finds a way to the playoff if they win this game. But I'll be able to sleep better at night knowing I picked Georgia. If Ole Miss wins, hat tip to them. But Georgia, I feel like you just can't pick against them until kind of proven otherwise, or they're playing Alabama. So give me Georgia 30, Ole Miss 27, Georgia -2.5, over 54.5. Georgia makes kind of a play late to get this win and the cover there on the road. We go to our G5 game of the week. Correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, but I don't think we've talked about Army yet as one of our teams. They come in at 25, 8-0 overall. They go to North Texas, who we've talked about once. They are 5-3. I don't think this will be an easy game. 3:30 kick on ESPN2. Army 5.5-point favorite, over under 63.5. Joe, do you like Army to remain undefeated going into the Notre Dame game next week?
Yeah, I actually hate this, but I'm going to go with North Texas here. I'm going North Texas 38, Army 28. I'm going to go with North Texas plus 5.5. I'm going to take the over. Once again, I really don't like the total there. But this North Texas team is a lot better than people realize. So they're 5-3, and they have that loss to Texas Tech, the 66-21 loss. That kind of makes people look at them like, well, how good are you really? But that was just a game where you had a pick six followed by an interception returned to like the 10. North Texas Tech scored like 21 points. I think it was like in 1 minute and 15 seconds of game time. You're not winning a game at that point. Like, it was a complete blowout from there. The game was over. But North Texas, back-to-back 2 tough losses against Memphis and Tulane. Coming off the bye, though, giving them an extra week to prepare for that triple option, I think will definitely help Army going on the road here into what will be, at this point, their biggest game of the season. If Army can get this done, you might see them bump up from like 25th to like maybe, in the top 20s, depending on how the committee, views this win on the road. Because I think it is kind of telling that Army's only 5.5-point favorites here after they've been pretty dominant this year. But Army, also having to go back-to-back from Air Force and down to Texas, all the way back up to New York. I think that's just kind of tough mentally. I know they are at the United States Military Academy, so mental toughness isn't something I'm going to doubt too much. But still, just aspect of going back-to-back road games isn't easy. I don't care who you are. And this is a pretty decent North Texas team. I just feel like Army's been due for a loss. You saw it happen in Navy against Rice, of all teams. I just got a bad feeling. I really hope I'm wrong. I hope Army wins this game by 50, and we'll see 9-0 Army against Notre Dame at Yankee Stadium in a couple weeks because Army does get a big bye week going into that game. But I am going to go with North Texas. I just feel like they have the offense to keep up with Army, and Army's defense really, hasn't seen a team as high flying as North Texas this year. Because the one thing about Army, Coyle, I'm sorry, I'm kind of rambling here. They haven't had to play Tulane or Memphis this year, and they will avoid them. Like their best win is maybe against East Carolina, like not the best win on the planet, but I think they're going to kind of be in for a culture shock almost with this North Texas team this week. So I'm going to go with the Mean Green.
Yeah, it's pretty. I was surprised to see you say that, but the point spread I think indicates that they could be on upset alert. But I'll go with the sticking point that Army hasn't trailed for a second this season. Pretty wild. Open up the show with Kent State hasn't led for a second this season. Army hasn't trailed for a second this season and still barely cracked the top 25. I thought that was a little bit disrespectful. Like I would probably had them, as you were talking about, like above Missouri, maybe above a couple of these other teams. Hell, Clemson. Like Army has just been dominant in their games. They're sitting at 8-0 and certainly I think still alive as one of those G5 teams in the playoff chase. They have a tough one here against North Texas, but then they have Notre Dame at Yankee Stadium and play UTSA. If they go undefeated during that stretch and win the AAC title game, I think it's going to be hard to keep them out even over Boise because at the end of the day, Army is undefeated. They beat their toughest team in Notre Dame, and Boise State has one loss, and they lost their toughest game in Oregon. I think it kind of comes down to that. So Army still, I think, has a legit shot to make the playoff, but they can't look past North Texas here. I agree that they could be on upset alert. Very high-flying offense with North Texas. Over their last 5, North Texas has scored 37, 44, 41, 52, and 44. So in this kind of circumstance, we know Army throws the ball a little bit more than they've been accustomed to. I think we see more of an old school Army attack this week and really try to limit the possessions for North Texas because that's a team that can go up and down the field and score in a hurry. So I think Army really tries to keep it to the old basic triple option here. Give me the Black Knights to stay undefeated, but North Texas give them a scare and keep this game close. But I will take Army to win and cover. I'll go Army 30, North Texas 23. So Army minus 5.5 and under 63.5 hitting there. All right, we go to the 4:00 window on Fox. Another team that I think needs some more praise and one of the surprise teams of the year. Number 20, Colorado at 6-2, at Texas Tech 6-3. As we said, a 4:00 kick on Fox. Colorado 3.5-point favorite here on the road, over under 62.5.
This game is going to rock. I think this game has a chance to be the most entertaining of the day. In terms of the back and forth, both these teams very good offensively, even though I am taking the under 62.5. But one thing, with both of these teams, especially with Dion and Colorado, defense isn't that good. You can see a lot of points in this game. I'm going to go with Texas Tech 31, Colorado 30, though. I just think going into Lubbock, this is going to be a crazy atmosphere for a Texas Tech team that isn't dead in terms of the Big 12 race. And, the beauty of the new 5 highest ranked conference champs, Texas Tech, they've been talking about it a lot on all the shows the past couple of weeks. Like, this is the first time that this many fan bases have hope for their team. Like, if you're a Texas Tech fan, I don't think Texas Tech is going to win the national title this year by any stretch. But if Texas Tech wins this game, maybe makes a run to the playoff, they can, pitch that going forward. Like, hey, this is what we did with this talent now, and, recruit better guys going forward. But that being said, when you have Shador and Travis Hunter, you have a fighter's chance in every game. It's just, I think that defense of Colorado will prove to be the breaking point. I literally have this game 31-30, have a 1-point game. I think it is going to be that close. But I am going to go with Texas Tech here at home. If this game is in Boulder, different story. But I am going to go with Texas Tech at home.
Real quick, back to the Army point. I'm looking at the group of 5 teams. Boise State's actually minus 250 right now to make the playoff. Tulane comes in as the second team at plus 350, and then Army is the third team at 10-1. Kind of surprised to see Army that low. I guess they probably look at the Navy game against Notre Dame and think Army doesn't have much of a shot in that one. But if Army wins that one and runs the table, I I think they're getting in because AAC title game they would have to play Tulane, right?
They would most, unless Tulane were to drop a game. But as of
Yeah.
right now, I believe I'll pull up the standings. I'm loving that we're talking AAC football right now. But
That's what it's about.
right now it would be Army and Tulane. They're the two undefeated teams, and that game would most likely, as of right now, be in West Point, which that would be sick.
Yeah.
Seeing Tulane having to go all the way up to Army.
Even if Army loses the game to Notre Dame, it doesn't impact the conference standings, so they could still go undefeated there.
And
I do think they need to win that game to have the chance at the playoff.
I will say though, Tulane, Coyle, before I don't want to take us too far off track. Tulane finishes the year at Navy and then versus Memphis. Those aren't exactly cakewalk games.
Yeah.
So they could lose those games, and we could all of a sudden be right back to Army Navy back-to-back weeks for the AAC. So,
all right, we get back to the Big 12. As I said at the beginning, Colorado for sure has been one of the stories of the year. I definitely a hat tip to them for what they have done and also what they did last week on their off week. They were able to kind of sit back on their couch, relax. Travis Hunter able to rest that shoulder, and they got to see both Kansas State and Iowa State lose as double-digit favorites. So that helps Colorado obviously stay alive in the Big 12 race. Travis Hunter gets a little bit more healthy, probably able to go out there and play his full snap load. And Shedeur Sanders, the offensive line, they've been clicking. This has been a pretty good-looking team since that Nebraska game. They're 5-1 since that butt kicking at Nebraska, who these two teams kind of have gone in the opposite direction since that game. Texas Tech, though, Joe, I think this is where this game comes down to. Really struggles on the back end on defense. They allow 307.2 passing yards per game through the air. That is the second worst in the entire country. What does Colorado like to do on offense? Not run the ball. They like to sling it with Horn, with Hunter, and obviously with Shedeur slinging the ball. So look for Shedeur, Travis, Jimmy Horn to have a big game in this one and be able to exploit this pretty weak Texas Tech secondary. I'm going to go Colorado 38, Texas Tech 28. Colorado minus 3.5 and the over of 62.5 hitting there. All right, we have three more games to get into. A Saturday afternoon SEC game, not like a super high profile game, but a game that I think is going to be really good and just like a fun game that not two of the biggest SEC brands, but two teams that are having good years for their program standards. And South Carolina with a win has a chance to get the bowl eligibility. Vandy, I think this is their best chance at getting to a seventh win, which would be a pretty big achievement for that program. But you got South Carolina at 5-3 at number 24 Vandy, who is 6-3. 4:15 kick on SEC Network. South Carolina minus 3.5. Over under is 45.5.
We know what Vandy this game, Coyle. A Vanderbilt team. When's the last time? It's got to be the first time in our lives that mathematically Vanderbilt is still very much alive for the SEC race. Like it's crazy. They're all the teams. There's 5 teams ahead of them that are 5-1, 4-1, 3-1, but they're 3-2, 6-3 overall. I mean, if they win this game, I actually think the winner of this game will be in the top 25 next week for the college football playoff. But I'm going to go with Vandy here, 20-13. I mean, this is something we see time and time again, like just a classic letdown spot. South Carolina, a massive, massive win. I mean, they've had 2 real close calls earlier with LSU and Bama. A couple plays go differently. Who knows? South Carolina could be 7-1. But now you're looking at a Gamecock team here at 5-3. This is all of a sudden now a very tough game on your schedule, having to go up to Vandy. I think Vanderbilt is going to get this one. I think Diego Pavia is going to make the plays where he needs to. Love the under in this game. South Carolina, very good defensively. I think this will be a dogfight late, but I am going to go with Vanderbilt to pull it out.
Yeah, that's on me. I forgot to remove the 24 next to Vandy's name as they're ranked in the AP poll, but not in the first college football playoff rankings, which I think you could argue is disrespectful as well. But Missouri did beat them. They do have one less loss. So what'd you say?
Georgia State loss. That's bad.
Yeah, so Georgia State. That's insane. Lose to Georgia State, beat Alabama in the same season. But I think when you look at this game the most, it looks like a big letdown spot here for South Carolina after that big win at home Saturday night on ABC against A&M. That's kind of one of those you're juiced up, you're really high off that win. Now you travel to Vandy, a much different atmosphere. I think it's a clear letdown, fall flat spot. But shouts to Vandy too for just keep putting more W's in the victory column. I know it was Auburn last week, and Auburn's program is in a bit of a dire strait right now, but still, you're Vanderbilt, you're beating Auburn, and you're at 6 wins. You're already at bowl eligibility. That's awesome for them. I think their over-under coming into the year was like 2.5. Outside of Indiana, though, I think Vanderbilt is the story of the year in terms of the teams from the Power 4 level. Just an awesome season for them. Like we said, they beat Alabama. They lose to Georgia State. That's kind of college football there in a nutshell. But they have a chance to get here to 7 wins, and that's just an awesome achievement for that program. After this game, they traveled to LSU and host Tennessee. So 2 most likely losses, I would think there. So I think this is by far the easiest matchup left on their schedule to get to 7 wins, and that would be for the first time since 2013 when they got to 9 wins. So a huge opportunity here for them. South Carolina's strength is up front on the defensive line, as we've seen throughout the season. But Vandy has shown the ability to hold their own against Texas, hold their own against Alabama at the point of attack. I don't think they're going to be too overpowered here at home in the spot. I'll take Vandy to win outright as well. Give me them 24-21, so Vandy plus 3.5 and the under 45.5. All right, the big one in the SEC on Saturday night, the de facto elimination game between number 11 Alabama, who is 6-2, at number 15 LSU, who is also 6-2. The 7:30 kick on ABC. Bama 3-point favorite, over under 58.5 here, Joe. Can Bama, who I was surprised to see as a favorite here on the road, go to Baton Rouge and get the outright win?
I don't think so. I mean, we've talked about it 1,000 times since we've done the show. LSU at night, it is a different environment. I just saw they're bringing back the live Mike the Tiger. They're going to have him next to Bama's locker room when they walk out. I am going LSU 35, Bama 28. I'm going to take LSU plus 3. Again, the thumbs up. Why does it do that? I don't know, but I am going to go with LSU here over Alabama. At the end of the day, I'm just going to take Nussmeier over Milroe at the quarterback spot in terms of passing the football. And Brian Kelly has been in these games a lot more than oh my God, I'm blanking on his name. Washington coach. DeBoer. I was about to say Dable. I'm like, that's the Giants coach. Than DeBoer has in terms of these SEC big time rivalries. I know DeBoer is used to Oregon, Washington, but this is a different universe. And I am going to go with LSU here by a touchdown. And I am going to take the over as well of 58.5.
So I saw this tweet earlier from Brett McMurphy, and it was like the most surprising thing I think I've seen all day. But he said LSU is a 3-point home underdog versus Alabama. 9th consecutive time LSU has been a home underdog versus Bama. LSU has lost 6 of the last 8 home games versus Bama, 4-4 against the spread. Last time LSU was a home favorite against Alabama, 2006. The quarterbacks Jamarcus Russell and John Parker Wilson. So I was really surprised. Like I think it was 2 years ago when Bryce Young was a quarterback. LSU won that game, right?
Yes.
I think they went for 2.
Yes, we were at, what's it called, in Wilkes-Barre.
The Phillies lost the World Series simultaneously. And then the other LSU win I can remember recent memory was the Burrow team, but that was at Alabama, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, in 2019, I think. So, all right, but throw that aside for my take and my rationale on this game. Underdogs are 29-13. That's a 69% cover rate against the spread in SEC conference games this year. Pretty wild there. I don't think we've seen anything super from Alabama that they deserve to be a favorite at LSU at night in this one. LSU should have won that A&M game. They pissed it away with missed kicks and turnovers. Will I be surprised if Alabama goes in there and wins? No, but I'm not going to bet against LSU at home at night, again, like I did in the Ole Miss game. Since Brian Kelly took over, LSU is 17-1 at home. And dating back to 2014, they are 57-12 straight up at home, which is the 11th best percentage over that time. I'm just kind of taking the X's and O's out of this one, going with the home field advantage of LSU. I would say if I would break down the X's and O's, I'd be a little bit worried about Jalen Milroe and his legs after what Marcel Reed was able to do to the LSU defense. But I think LSU outplayed A&M in that game. They kind of just gave it away, as I said, with the missed kicks, the interceptions. They had that game, and LSU should be going into this one feeling a lot more comfortable. But a desperation game at home, do or die moment for both these teams. I'm going to go with the home team and LSU. I definitely would take the +3, but I think they're going to win it outright as well. I'll go LSU 31, Bama 28. So LSU +3 and over 58.5. In our final game of the week, we go to the Big 12. You would have thought the records would probably be reversed in this one. Surprising to see the records next to these teams' names going into this one. But that's number 9, BYU, 8-0 at Utah, 4-4. 10:15 kick on ESPN. BYU -4, over under 41.5. And Joe, I heard this on one podcast this week, but they said it might not get all the publicity and the glitz and glamour of other rivalry games, but BYU and Utah is the most hated rivalry in college football. Would you care to comment on that?
They fucking hate each other. It's the holy war. They despise each other. I think they had to like postpone the basketball rivalry for a few years when BYU was in the West Coast Conference because of like fights like between the fans. Like they despise each other. It is right up there with the SEC rivalries. I'm not saying it's SEC culture. I'm just saying, like, in terms of pure hatred, BYU and Utah hate each other. That's why I am going to go with Utah here, 17-14. I feel like this is going to be an ugly, sloppy game. I keep not believing in BYU, and they keep proving me wrong. So they will probably prove me wrong again. But I'm going to go with Utah at home in a massive rivalry game. Whittingham has, been there forever. Satake, now one of the coaches, he's still at BYU, correct? Kalani Satake?
Yep.
He's still at BYU. Two coaches, like very not talked about, have been at their schools for a long damn time now. But I know Rising's out. Is it Zach Wilson's brother still starting for Utah?
Isaac.
Betting on a Wilson does scare me, but I am going to go with Utah at home just purely because in a big rivalry game like this, I mean, and you're a home dog, I'm going to take the home dog in a rivalry every time. So I'm going to go with Utah here plus the 4. Love the under. I would be shocked if that goes over. So 42-0 BYU probably.
Yeah, it's I feel like the last game of the night is typically like the chaotic one, but I'm expecting this one. It could have some chaos, but it's going to be more of a snooze fest. So like, why the hell am I still up watching this type game? And it's most likely because you're betting on it. But rivalry game, as you were touching on, first time against each other in the Big 12. And is this like a Vegas nose game with the spread? BYU having by far their best season in recent memory. Utah having their worst. Like, why is the spread this low? Cam Rising not playing. It's one of those kind of makes you scratch your head and be like, does Vegas know that this is a game that Utah's going to win? Utah is 92-28 at home under Whittingham since 2005 when he became the head coach. So that's a pretty dominant home field advantage over that time. Is BYU due for a slip up? In recent weeks, they've escaped Baylor. They've escaped Oklahoma State, both by 1 score. Been a real lost season for Utah, but they really have the chance to kind of ruin their rivals here. A Super Bowl type game, a Super Bowl type pump up for Utah. Get to ruin your hated rival season pretty much. BYU still has a chance, obviously, to go to the playoff, but it becomes a much more difficult path if they lose this game. I think Utah gets up for this one, and they find a way to, despite everything that's going on this year, get it done and win this game at home. I'm going to go Utah 21, BYU 20, so Utah +4 and under 41.5 there. All right, our final 2 picks of the week, our dog of the day and our lock of the week. Real ugly slate of kind of dogs this week outside of the main ones that we already kind of touched on. Like I was looking at maybe doing Vandy, maybe doing LSU, but wanted to go to a different game outside the box. This is a Friday night game, and that's the Wake Forest Demon Deacons at +7. They host Cal on Friday night, so obviously cross-country trip there for Cal, going from Cali to Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I think Wake, who's 4-4, shouldn't be a 7-point underdog in this game against a Cal team that's also 4-4. I believe Cal's also 0-4 in ACC play or 1-3 in ACC play. So it's not like this is a very good Cal squad. Wake Forest, are they going to win it outright? I'm not saying that, but I definitely think they can keep it within a touchdown, and Cal doesn't deserve to be this big of a favorite on the road. So I'm going to go with Wake Forest +7 as my dog of the week this week, and that is a Friday night game. So make sure to take note of that.
Yeah, Coyle, I mean, you kind of said it best. A lot of the dogs that I liked were in our slate. And I was looking at the Wake Forest game. I saw you had it. The only other game I looked at So I'm going with LSU +3. This I think the first time I've ever, since we've been doing the dogs and the locks, like gone with a game we've already talked about. I really try to, mention other games, but I really didn't like a lot of dogs outside of the games we talked about. The one game I did look at, which is just like a plug your nose, this smells like shit game, was Mizzou +3 at home against Oklahoma. I saw that, but ultimately with just Brady Cook's injury status, not playing last week, I don't know if he's going to play this week. I stayed away just because I really don't know what Missouri team I'm going to get. But that was what I was looking at. Another one I looked at too was Virginia Tech +6.5 at home against Clemson. I
It's a
mean,
shame that's an afternoon game.
I know, but Virginia Tech, just another, them and Oklahoma State, my two biggest futures, and they're both going to lose. I think I had like 50 something bucks on over 7.5 wins. Virginia Tech would need to win out to get to 8, and I don't see them winning out. But those would be the other two games I would look at. But I'm going to go with LSU for the purpose of the show this week.
All right. My lock of the week this week, I also kind of struggled to find a bet that I was like super in love with, but I'm just going to go with a team that's been on a roll and has been dominating all year, and that's the Indiana Hoosiers, -14. I basically said in my notes here, fuck it. They cover every damn week. They blow out every team they play. Another chance to put on a show here before they head to Columbus for the big game against Ohio State. They get a beaten down Michigan team that's definitely in lost season type of land right now. So I'm going to go with Indiana -14. My Signetti shirt came in this week. I'll probably proudly rep it on Saturday and say go Hoosiers. So Indiana -14 for my lock of the week.
I'm going with a Friday game for my lock as well, Coyle. I'm going to go with Memphis versus Rice. They're 8-point favorites. I am taking Memphis to cover that spread. Rice coming off a massive win against Navy. They're 3-6, not having a good year. Now you got to go up to Memphis, who is coming off a tough loss at UTSA. I feel like Memphis is going to come in and play pissed off because they are, especially with the fact that they have to play Tulane at the end of the season, not dead in terms of the AAC race. So they definitely need these next two. They play Rice and UAB at home, both gimmies. They should take care of business and win those games. I am going to go with Memphis here in a big game. I think they're going to bounce back right. I might tease them. I might sprinkle Memphis -13.5. I think they're going to roll Rice on Friday night.
All right. Well, there you have it. Week 11. Can't believe it. 2 weeks will be, right?
I can't take it.
2 weeks is rivalry week, or is that 3?
3, because it's normally week 14 is rivalry week. Yes,
okay.
week 3 more.
All right. It's depressing to say that, but all right, that will do it for the Week 11 show. As always, we will be back next week breaking down playoff rankings. Now that we're back to kind of normal life, probably try and do Tuesday night post rankings, and then break down the Week 12 slate coming up. But that'll do it here for this week of Beef Up Front. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Like, subscribe, and we'll talk next week.